Welcome to the Inspirational Corner with me, your host, Stylisha Bowden, where we encourage you here to live bold, live loud, and live authentically without apology. Welcome to another episode, everyone. And if this is your first time listening in, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel so you will not miss out on any new episodes. And also, if this is your first time listening in, I truly encourage you to go back to my latest episode, which was episode 30, and it was entitled The Self Care Plan Establishing a Plan. It will be important for you to listen to part one because today I'm going to get into part two with the self care plan, and we're going to be bringing it all together. And I'm going to be discussing the different components that you will need to create your self care plan for yourself and to be able to create coping strategies under each category. So let's get into it, everybody. I'm excited. Self care is a big thing for me. I talked about in part one, in episode 30, how I started my self care journey. And self care really started for me. And I talked about, like I said in episode one, it started for me, I say 2011, really, but 2015 is when I really started to get more in depth with my self care. I went from a surface level self care to more of a deeper understanding and a deeper level of self care for myself. And so when I was kind of looking up the definition of really what does self care mean, I was researching and looking, and I kind of created my own definition with all the things that I was seeing coming up with the word self care. And so this is my definition for self care. I would best describe self care as intentional actions that you take to preserve your mental, emotional, physical well being. And I think those components are the main key components and main categories for your self care and starting a self care plan. Because everything that happens in our mind and the way our mindset is, it trickles down and it affects our emotional health and physical health. When we're stressed out, when we're, you know, not expressing our emotions or facing how we feel, it started to affect our physical body. And that's what creates certain, and most actually, that's what create most diseases. And when I look at the word disease, I usually say dis-ease because it creates a dis-ease in our body. I don't know how many years ago, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. I can't really remember. I'm thinking maybe 2019. I say two. I maybe about two years ago, where I seen a documentary on Netflix, and it was called Heal, and each person in the documentary was talking about their dis-ease. And I always say disease like that, dis-ease in their body. And so in the documentary, they had different people talk about the things they went through in their childhood and, a lot of unresolved issues in their life period. And the whole point of the Heal documentary was that a major part of the word disease or I always say dis-ease, comes from things that we are harboring, whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's anger, whether it's unforgiveness. This creates the diseases in our body. And we have physical things that happen, like a heart attack just don't happen, or aneurysm just doesn't happen. There can be things, and my disclaimer, of course, you all know I'm not a doctor or anything, but watching that documentary gave me a lot of insight on how important self-care is, and not only self-care, but how important it is to face how you feel and deal with the things in your life. And I know many of us, or some of us, we may not discuss our past, or we may not talk about the different dysfunctional things that we've been through in our lives, or dysfunctional family dynamics. But I think it's so important, because when you can get to the root of those things, it can help you heal. I know for me, at the beginning of 2020, I really told myself I wanted to begin to have healthy relationships in my life. And I could not expect to have healthy relationships in my life until I began to face the unhealthy things within me. And it all started with me, my mindset, my emotional unhealthy behaviors, and my physical things that I was dealing with. And so when I started to deal with my unhealthy mindset, the unhealthy ways that I thought, even about myself, not feeling that I was worthy or not enough, not accepting myself, feeling like I needed to fit in, or not even fit in, I don't want to say that word, or feeling like I needed to be validated or accepted by others so long ago, it created a lot of dysfunctional relationships I had in friendships. I have had, the root of enabling, being an enabler, it created those type of friendships and unhealthy, relationships with the men, that was involved with, abuse, mental, emotional abuse that I went through, and even, verbal abuse that I went through in my life, in my past with men, is because of the unhealthy patterns that was in my life. And so after watching that documentary, I truly understand how important your mental, emotional, and physical health is, and how those three things do intertwine with each other. And so, because we understand that mental and emotional and physical well-being is such an important dynamic part of our lifestyle and our health, and they affect every other area in our life, I think those three main categories, when you start your self-care plan, should be the three categories that you start with: your mental, emotional, and physical, because everything starts with the mind, and then it works it work down, work your way, work, what I'm trying to say, I'm tongue tied, you can work your way down, that's what I'm trying to say. I believe when you make an intentional effort to preserve your mental, your emotional, and physical care, then it produces healthy results in other parts of your life. Just like what I talked about, once I started to address some things in 2020 that I still hadn't addressed, in my life, I was getting tired of producing unhealthy relationships and friendships, and romantic relationships with men. And I'm like, you know what? I need to be healthy first. So why am I still, I've constantly done the quote unquote, what we say, work, but I've constantly done the inner healing on some things, but there was still more inner healing, and it will always be more inner healing that I need to go through, because I'm human, and there's still things that I'm working through, and it's a journey, it's a process, and it's okay, and it's something that you don't have to rush, but you have to just have that self-awareness and take that time out to step back. And a lot of us, we don't make an intentional effort to take that time out to say, you know what, why am I attracting the same people or places or things, or I get to a point in my life and I feel like I'm hitting a limit, whether it's in my career or in my financial life. And the reason you may go through those, what I call insanity cycles and circles, is because there's something deeply rooted within that you have not addressed, and you really have to, do a lot of inner work to get to that root and say, okay, aha, this is the root, whether it's unforgiveness, bitterness, childhood trauma, or childhood hurt, it could be even something even minor, being, hurt in your past, or, jealous of somebody else. These little things are little seeds that's planted and that grow into something so much bigger. So I just think it's important when we look at our mental, emotional, and physical well-being, then everything else in our life will line up better when we start attacking those areas. And I just think overall, when you start putting your well-being first, it will help you understand the different stressors in your life that affect your mind, your body, your spirit, and your soul. Because when you have all these different stressors in your life and you're not acknowledging them or saying, okay, let me step back, instead of keep going, or doing to cover up how you really feeling. And a lot of us, that's what we do. I know years ago, or several years ago, I used to do that because I was still feeling hurt and pain from, the grief and loss of my daughter. I didn't want to face a lot of emotions. So I stayed busy. I kept on, I found myself giving here, giving there, doing this, doing that. And I was a train wreck, really. I was pretty much a train wreck. And it's just every little thing will push me over the edge, which would manifest into anger outbursts, my anxiety levels being high, and already dealing with the different things that I discussed in the last episode, all those different things that I was dealing with and still kind of deal with. I still deal with now, but I can deal with a little bit better, because I have my coping strategies that I can say, okay, I feel anxiety, or I'm getting angry. Okay, how I'm going to deal with this. Okay, I'm feeling, the PTSD coming on, with the anger, the anxiety and the stress and everything. Okay, how can I deal with it? And I could just go say, okay, for my mental self-care, I can meditate, I can pray, I can, watch something different. What am I watching on TV that's, feeding my stress and anger and all these other internal issues? And we have to be so careful of how important what we put in our brains and what we watch. And we have to be careful because it can trigger us in ways that we don't know. So with my self-care journey, coping with all these things has really helped me take a step back and learn to reflect on creating, like I said before, this individual self-care plan for myself. And it truly has given me a peace of mind when I have a lot going on, or when life gets a little hard for me. And I think it's important to make yourself a priority. I believe when you start to make yourself a priority in your life, things truly begin to shift. And you won't feel neglected, tired, or burnt out, or you won't feel like you've been unappreciated, because you're going to be giving back to yourself. You're going to be filling up your cup first before you start your day, before you jump into any project or business or even your job. You can give back to yourself, and creating the self-care plan will help you be intentional and responsible for creating a healthy well-being for yourself. I believe too often we will outsource these things and responsibilities to other. And when we're delegating all these, different responsibilities to other people, like it's other people's job to keep our mental, emotional, and physical lifestyle in check, when it's truly our responsibility. And when we delegate these things to other people, first of all, we're saying, my mental, emotional health is not my responsibility. It's your responsibility to treat me better, or say nice things, or do me a certain way. And, we're giving them control over our life. And not only that, and if it's not the right person, they're going to manipulate you, outsourcing those mental, emotional responsibilities. They're going to play on that. They're going to truly manipulate that. And it's going to just keep you in a perpetual journey and path of frustration and disappointment, because that will be the result of you not taking the responsibility for your own mental, emotional, and physical health care. And so I want to give you a couple of steps to help you start the journey of building your self-care plan. And so with the first step, I would say, get a journal, a poster board, or even if you have a notebook, I think it's important to list the different categories for your self-care plan. Now, the first three categories that I would truly focus on first would be your mental, emotional, and your physical self-care. Those would be the first three categories, the main categories, because like I said, your mental state affects your emotional state, which your mental and emotional will eventually affect your physical state. So after that, after you have, you know, list your categories, your first three categories, your mental, emotional, and physical category, then you're going to list the other categories. And depending on what particular areas are important to you, you might not list that category, or you might add more categories. So for example, the categories that you would probably have, and I always say there will be about 6 to 8 categories for your self-care plan. You're going to have your mental first, your emotional second, your physical, then your spiritual, your social slash relational, your professional, recreational, which would be like your leisure time, and your financial categories for your self-care plan. And once you list all your categories, then I suggest that you at least create 3 to 5 coping strategies. And you may wonder, what is a coping strategy? For instance, for me, when I talk about my mental self-care, and if I was looking at my self-care plan, with my mental self-care, I would put meditation. Now I'm trying to think, what would I put first? Meditation, listening to a podcast, prayer. I would also put journaling. That would probably be my fourth, and I might put one more, a fifth thing. And so those 3 to 5 things that I discussed would be a part of my mental self-care. And for emotional, I probably would put therapy, journaling, setting boundaries, doing emotional check-in like I talked about before, just checking in with your emotions and saying, hey, why am I feeling like this right now? What has triggered me to feel like this? And kind of going deep with your emotions and just stepping back, taking that time out to step back and kind of do a emotional check-in. Because I know I do mental check-ins with myself and my daughter, like, how you doing? How you feeling? We actually talk about, how we're doing, how we feeling, what's going on. And I think those are important. And for your physical coping strategies would probably be walking, being in nature, your healthy routine for eating, and your physical routine checkups you get on a quarterly or annually basis. Those things you can put in there, and even exercising. So those are just examples of your 3 to 5 coping strategies that you would include under each category for your mental, emotional, physical self-care. And the reason I say starting with your mental, emotional, and physical are the 3 first categories to start with, because like I said before, those are the most important categories, because like I said, your mental and emotional affects your physical. And then you could, like I said, you could list the spiritual, the professional, and all the other ones, down the line. Once you have done these particular steps, and it was like 3 steps I discussed, once you have done all this, then you're pretty much done with your self-care plan. Now you can always go back and add other coping strategies under each category, your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial, and all that. You can list other coping strategies later on, but the only reason I say focus on 3 to 5, because you can implement these 3 to 5 coping strategies maybe weekly or daily, into your life. And then as you're implementing these 3 to 5 coping strategies, when you add more, you can just start adding them into your daily lifestyle and routine, because your self-care plan should become a lifestyle change, not so much as a checklist. Oh, this is another thing to put on the to-do list. But for me, when I meditate, read something inspirational, write in my journal. And recently I just started this year writing 3 to 5 things what I'm grateful for. And I do that in another journal, and it's called my grateful journal, my, that I write in, because I read the book called The Magic, and it's pretty much talking about gratitude. But I just encourage you to read that book because it truly changed my life. I read it at the end of 2020, and it truly has changed my outlook on life, and it just truly changed my life in a lot of ways. With that said, so gratitude is a part of my mental daily thing that I do. I used to write, I used to list 10 things, and I was like, you know what, if that's too much, let me just focus on like 3 to 5 things to kind of break it down and not like feel like, oh, I got to do 10 things. And, just to kind of focus on 3 to 5 things that I'm grateful for each morning. So that's a part of my mental self-care plan. And like I said, once you implement these strategies, you're going to consistently, if you be intentional about just incorporating just even one coping strategy from each category, you will see it. I feel like you'll see a change and a shift in your life. I know for me, I have seen such a change and shift in my life, because when I'm out of whack and I stop doing my mental health or my mental, emotional, and physical and all the other areas self-care, I see a difference. I always see a difference, and I always notice a change. And 2, I want to encourage you. You can also read the podcast as well on my blog, because when you go to my blog, you're going to be able to download a free ebook called The Self-Care Plan, Establishing Your Plan. And in the ebook, I already have it where I have helped you already start your self-care plan, and you can use that as a guide where I've listed the mental, emotional, physical, social, relational, and all the different other categories. And it has like 5 lines, and you can start listing your coping strategies, what I talked about. And you can always come back to this podcast and, go over it and, say, what did she say? What is coping strategies again? And how do I implement those? So I think that's important. When you start listing your different 3 to 5 coping strategies, it will be your aha moment, really. Like, okay, I'm feeling like this mentally or emotionally, or I'm having these things going on in my life financially. Let me go back to my self-care plan. Let me incorporate something to help me get back on track. It's like a internal alarm clock. To me, that's what my self-care plan has become. It's like an internal alarm clock to get myself back on track. And so I truly hope you all enjoyed me talking about the self-care plan, establishing your self-care plan and bringing it all together and understanding what a self-care plan is. Because I believe, because this is only the second month, because we're in February now. If you're listening into this podcast, or by the time you listen into this podcast, it's going to be February. And this is the second day of February. So you still have time to set a pace. You don't have to let 2021 get away from you. You still have time to kind of plan, focus, be intentional about the life that you want to create for yourself. And I just felt like it was so important to talk about the self-care plan and making yourself a priority at the beginning of the year, because we had just let the year come in and it sometimes get away from us. And then we end up at the end of our year and be like, oh, I didn't make no time for me. Oh, or, oh my goodness, I've been angry and frustrated and upset, for the last 3 or 4 months. It's because I haven't put myself a priority. I haven't made myself first. And when you start with the self-care plan at the beginning of the year, it'll always you'll always go back to it. Because like I said, it's like an internal alarm clock. You'll be like, oh, okay, what I need to make some time for myself. Let me go to my financial plan or the coping strategies that I put for my financial. Okay, I said I was going to start every Monday, start looking at my bank account and looking at how much to put it, to how much to save for myself as far as the things that I want to do. Just little things like that. I think those things make a difference. So with that said, I hope you all have a beautiful week. And here at the Inspirational Corner, we always encourage you to live bold, live loud, and live authentically without apology. Have a beautiful, blessed week, everyone.